Hello, good evening from London, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors podcast, our weekly podcast. This week we are on our foundational level for beginners, people who are starting out in this wonderful world of self-publishing, and I am here with ALLi production manager and all-round indie author supremo, Dan Parsons. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Orna. Hi, everyone.
So yeah, this evening we're going to be talking, and I know it's probably not evening where you are, but it's evening where we are, and it's very evening-ish because it's moved into November, so it's kind of dark here. We're going to be talking about lean publishing, which is a term that's being a bit of a buzzword in the community at the moment, being passed around quite a bit, and there's a little bit of confusion about what it actually means. So some people think, and quite logically think, when they hear the term lean publishing, they think it's about budget conscious publishing, if you like, keeping things as lean and as tight as possible. And that is, I guess, one definition. But that's not quite what we're talking about here this evening. It has one of those publishing jargon words that has quite a specific meaning. So do you want to have a go at a definition, Dan?
I can give my definition at least. So lean publishing is essentially a way to produce content by looking for an audience first to ensure that you actually have a product that aligns with an audience before you invest a lot of money. So it can stop you from wasting a ton of money. I know it sort of takes the luck element out of it, because we all know lots of authors, and I think ourselves included probably, who have created books in the past, spent lots and lots of money on covers, we've done editing, and we've not really thought about the audience that it's going to align with. And what lean publishing does is it helps you to produce an initial book fairly cheaply, budget conscious and all the rest of it. And then you can find an audience for that and then tweak the product to meet the audience's demand so that it maximizes your return as much as possible. I know some people possibly think that takes a little bit of the art out of it, but we are publishers ultimately as well. So you've got to think about, how am I going to produce a positive return on investment? Because how else can you go full time?
Yes, and I think there's a few things to be said about that. You're absolutely right about the art thing, and there are some people who are listening and going, this is completely cart before the horse kind of thing, is completely the wrong way around. This isn't why I decided I wanted to, to do writing for my living, or for my pleasure. So, we are not saying you have to do this, but we do want you to know that publishing is different now. And in the old days, you didn't have any choice but to kind of take a punt and put a book out there and see what happened and kind of go from there, put out the full book, in other words. And that was the end of the book. The book went, it either failed or succeeded. And if it, in either case, you moved on to the next book and you didn't really learn very much. The book just went into the marketplace. Sorry, you're going to say something?
Yeah, well, one thing that we've got now, obviously, that we wouldn't have had years ago, is print on demand and digital publishing. So whereas before you had to sort of hedge your bets on a book that you think will do well by getting a large print run at the start, whereas now you don't need to do that as much, because you can bring out a product. It doesn't cost you anything really, other than some of the small investments that you make just to bring it to market in a readable state. And then you can always update the features without having to pulp 3,000 copies of your book and then buy new ones. So you can always sort of, updating an ebook doesn't cost anything, and updating a paperback is a minimal cost, through Ingram and KDP Print and places like that. So we're in a state where we can move quite nimbly, especially as indie authors, because we don't have this history of having to have all of this upfront investment and all of the research done beforehand. We can do it sort of on the fly and move quite nimbly.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that hasn't sunk in for authors, and particularly for people who are starting off. Very often when we come into indie publishing, we're carrying a lot of assumptions about how books are made. We assume we have to do a print run. Loads of authors who join ALLi every week come in with the assumption that some authors haven't even got around to thinking about ebooks or audiobooks, or don't fully understand the difference between print on demand and consignment. So it's lean publishing as a term is a way for us to begin to understand that we have lots of different publishing options, and maybe to open our minds up a bit about what is possible for us as publishers. And I think the other thing to sort of note about it is that publishing today is for authors, and the advantage that we have as indie authors is how close we can get to our readers, and how we can actually get their feedback and get their input into our books as we are making them. And that again is a terrific advantage that we didn't have before, and it's one to be kind of grabbed, because readers love it. They love being involved in the actual making of the book, and it can be a really enriching experience for the author as well.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously we'll talk a little bit later on about the exact relationship you can have with readers to include them into your lean publishing, your schedule, if you wanted to do it that way as a regular process, or if you wanted to do it as a one-off, you can do it that way as well. But we've also got other tools that don't directly correlate with us talking to readers, but they are tools that we've got now that we can see things that happen in the markets with the readers without them needing to be involved. So things like we can do some of the analysis beforehand to see if a book is going to take off before we actually even start producing the original product, to save some money. So we can track the market using, I know there are some services out there. There's Klytics, which tracks a lot of I think it's just Amazon they do. I haven't downloaded one of their reports myself, but I know that they do in-depth Amazon reports where they say this is a hungry genre. These are the estimated number of readers in this subgenre. And this one is growing over a 5-year period. This is how many sales you need to get to this rank. And, these are the trending keywords for people who read in this subgenre. So you can use that sort of data along with things like KDP Rocket, or I think it's called Publisher Rocket now, where you can find out what are popular keywords that people are searching on Amazon, so that there's a demand for certain keywords and not for other ones. So, for example, if you're publishing a non-fiction book and you're thinking, I'd like to write on a particular topic, you can find out what keywords you need in your title to gain enough of a momentum with readers who are searching for those particular topics. And you could always find that the thing you want to write about actually doesn't have a demand, because this isn't just about finding a gap in the market, because you don't just want to find a completely original idea. You want to find a hungry gap. So there's nothing wrong with taking a new spin on an existing idea if it's going to get you a lot more readers.
Yeah. And it's worth saying, I think, that it's easier, like as with all book marketing, around SEO and keywords and so on. It is easier for nonfiction to actually identify that hungry market, I think. With fiction and poetry, it's still, there's still going to be a little bit of kind of gut reaction there. The keywords don't align necessarily as cleanly and as clearly as they do for nonfiction. But the essential point remains that looking at it this way around is a huge learning experience. Even, going into your genre that you want, your large genre that you want to write in, and then looking at the subgenres and the various ways in which they break down can be a really useful exercise to do, and you can learn a huge amount about it. And then in terms of, if you do find something that is that you feel has a potential market, then you can test that. And I think the important thing to say is that books that are approached in this way generally convert much better. They get more organic sales, they get better return on investment all round. And, there is that fan connection. They are far more likely to actually connect with you're actively doing the job of connecting with what people want rather than what you want. And so you're more in service mode. So yeah, if you can make this sort of mental shift.
What you can actually do, just to go back to your point on poetry, because obviously it's a little bit more difficult with keywords for poetry, because there's not necessarily a niche subgenre for different poetry genres, because it's just not a huge market for that. And there also aren't different, reader demographics that you can really track very well with poetry. What you can do is look for keywords based on feel or theme for poetry. And I found that, things like, I think with research I've done in the past, I found that poetry that makes you happy is much, much more highly searched than any other type of poetry. So I think people, if you're looking purely from a data perspective, they want quite upbeat, different poetry, because I think a lot of poetry tends to be introspective and sort of very deep and morose, whereas clearly there's an untapped market for people who just want happy poetry that they can sort of read on the loo once a day to set them up for the day or something like that. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be
very unpoetic.
I mean, some of the rawest poetry is not poetic, so
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, so there's lots of things you can look into.
Yeah, because you and I have done a bit of this in the very recent past, looking at poetry and looking at the keywords that actually sell, as opposed to the ones that we or I thought might sell. When we actually looked into it, there were some interesting keywords, weren't there, that really you would never probably think of if you didn't.
And even keyword strengths. So you can look into things like, long sentences that you think, that's hardly ever searched. But when you find out it's actually, there's a huge number of people who have a similar track brain. So they must be searching the same sorts of things. So yeah, you can actually find long strands of keywords that other authors wouldn't necessarily be targeting, because, why would they with a long set of keywords? You think a really popular single keyword would be a stronger choice, but yeah, often you can find that there are these things that people want very specifically, and lots of people want the same thing. But yeah, you should probably start with data if you're looking into analyzing the data before you produce something. But then also, once you've produced your initial book, there's a concept in Silicon Valley called minimum viable product. And this is what Facebook did, where they basically brought out the Facebook, the original version, and then pitched it to students in the Harvard campus, I think it was, and then based on reader feed or user feedback at the time, quickly made iterations to make it better, because that's probably better than trying to create an end product, taking a lot longer to do it and investing a lot more time and money, and then ultimately creating something that people don't want.
And
so yeah, you can make this minimal viable product, and then just sort of A/B test to iterate into something that's marketable.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing about minimal, I can never say it, viable product. MVP, much easier. I have heard people recommend putting out an MVP, a book, without an editor, without editorial, and that is something that we would not recommend. So even though you're going to do a small lean tester, it still needs to be done to professional standards. It doesn't, the fact that we're saying, put it out there to get feedback, we're not saying put it out there with lots of conscious mistakes in it. We're saying just to put out the minimum, to leave yourself open to learning and to give yourself, because it saves you money, but it also saves you time. And time is our most precious resource. And it's also a really good learning experience. So, there are all sorts of good creative reasons for doing this. It isn't just a commercial thing. Creatively, it can be very enriching as well. But yeah, it doesn't mean you do without an editor. Editors are always needed.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is that if you're going to go down this route for commercial reasons, just because something is built with commerciality in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean it's lost its art sense. Because even something like some of the original Shakespeare plays, I did a literature when I was in uni, and I know that a lot of that was sort of adapted after it was initially shown to the audience for some of the jokes and things like that, where things were rewritten over time. So even some of the greatest artwork is adapted in this sort of way.
Dickens put his stuff out serially and then modified it when it came to putting it together in book form. So yes, you're not in any way being untrue to your inner artist to approach things in this way. I think about it as being in service to the reader. I mean, I haven't approached publishing in this way, and I think it's a very interesting way to think about things for somebody like me who did come through the old school way. And it's a big ship to kind of turn it around and start thinking about it, but it's certainly something that I'll be adopting as we go forward. And yeah, so once you've done your analysis, then once you've kind of done your got some data and stuff, what next? How do you use that feedback to actually?
So yeah, you create your MVP, and initially you want to look at the packaging. So we'll move from packaging to contents, because packaging is the thing that if people don't get through the packaging, they never see the contents. So you use a sort of data-driven perspective for analyzing how effective your packaging is. So this includes things like your title, your book cover.
I think we've lost Dan there.
And Drive.
Oh yeah, sorry, you froze there for a moment. Do you want to just repeat that?
Yeah. So yeah, you'll want to test different quantitative parts of your packaging. So things that can be measured with numbers, basically. So things like your title, your book cover, your product description on sales pages. And then, yeah, what you can do is you can run things like Facebook ads or a Google AdWords ads. I think famously, Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, did this when he was pitching non-fiction books. He ran Google AdWords ads and then hadn't even created the book yet, just created a fake sales page, and then saw how many people clicked through and clicked the buy button, so he could optimize his book cover and product description and title based on ads before he's even created the book, because these people thought they were going on to buy the book, so they're completely unbiased. Obviously, the buy button wouldn't work and then they just click away, but he would have already collected the data to know which things worked and which things didn't. And that's how he A/B tested into, I think his book has sold a few million at this point. So it's a process that works, particularly, like you said, in non-fiction. But yeah, so you can use these data points and just A/B testing is a process in marketing where you change one variable at a time. So say you'll change the title first, and you'll just test the title at 2 or 3 different variations of titles, and then compare the performance of those titles against each other. Once you've got the ideal title, you can move on to the book cover and create a few variations of the book cover with the same title, and then see which ones of those gets the biggest reaction. And then eventually you'll go on to the product description and see which ones of your variations gets the best conversion rate. So it's this process where you're moving customers into readers through this sales funnel, essentially, and just trying to make it as efficient as possible. And then, yeah, once you've got through the packaging element and you've definitely got people to buy the book, the next step that we're going to have to talk about is trying to get them to continue reading the book after they've looked at the first page, because that's an entirely more difficult and nuanced thing that you've got to approach.
Yes, and there isn't as much data, so it's much easier to actually test your title and your cover and stuff like that than it is to see where people fall off reading, for example. It would be great to be able to get more detailed information about stuff like that. So what can people do to actually get that information?
Okay, so I know lots of big successful authors who use their ARC team, so their advanced reader team, who give them reviews and stuff before they sort of engage with them for that. They talk about beta reading their book, so they'll send them an early version of their book that I think has had one editing phase but hasn't gone through the full editing phase with their editor, just to make sure the story aligns with how the readers would like it to go. So if you were using a romance novel as an example, we know that romance readers like a happily ever after. So if you were a romance author and you thought, oh, I'll change it up a bit and I'll end this in a violent death instead, very, very different. And then you got horrible feedback from chapter 17 onwards of your novel where everyone hates the end, right, I clearly need to change chapter 17, otherwise they're not going to go on and read the sequels and contribute to read through. And then you can actually, there's one little tip that I didn't put in the show notes for us guys before I started, but if you use Wattpad, their analytics are based on chapter reads. So you can see how many people have read each chapter in your book all the way through. And you can use the comment section where readers can comment on your book to actually see what they liked about each chapter, and then possibly increase your read-through rate based on how many people then continue. And you can see the later chapters ramping up the number of reads. So it is a really good tool, Wattpad, to use to calculate your exact read through, find out where a ton of the people drop off, because you can see the numbers per chapter, and also see the live comments saying exactly what it was that they liked and disliked.
If you can build a following on Wattpad first. So it's something that you kind of need to, this happens spontaneously, I think, very organically on Wattpad, with people who go on to use it and build over time. Yeah, go on.
Yes and no. So you can build organically on Wattpad, but there are also merchandising deals. So if you just contact the Wattpad merchandising team, I think they call the Wattpad content team, you can ask them what carousels and things they've got coming up for. I did one with a zombie book once, and that was because they were promoting the release of the movie of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So they wanted a few different funny zombie books that they could then promote in a carousel to readers that would like the same books. So you can just find out what they've got coming up, and you don't even have to be particularly popular on there. If the content team pick you up, it's because they've got an editorial choice in it, and it can make you far more popular, and then you get all the readers come through and give you that data that you need.
That's great. So if you've got the kind of book that works on Wattpad, that's a really great way to go about it. What other tools can people use to get some feedback on their content?
So you can obviously just use the basic email, that sort of stuff, where you get people to respond based on what you sending out ARC copies and things like that. And if you're looking at the conversion into buy-in rates, then a really good tool that I've never heard any other authors talking about is Smashwords. So we sort of neglect Smashwords a little bit now, because some of the newer players have come out, Draft to Digital, and they're doing sort of different things, and Publish Drive and all that. There's a lot more competition, whereas Smashwords used to be the big player in the distribution end of ebooks. But they've got some really interesting tools that talk about the conversion on sales pages. So if you actually look at directing readers to your sales pages, you can see how many people have viewed the page, and then you can see the sales of the book, and then they've got extra analytics like that, so that can sort of help you through the process without you having to build your own website or build traffic yourself, because they've got a little bit more organic than you might be able to generate.
Fantastic. And of course, when a book is out and actually published, reviews should be treated in exactly the same way. So reviews are an absolute, a lot of beginner authors dread and fear reviews, but actually the healthy way to approach your reviews is as feedback and a learning opportunity in just exactly the same sort of way. And I think if you can build your review process into a whole lean publishing process, then it's very easy to slot it in that way, and it can take a lot of the kind of emotional, it never takes it all away. Nobody's ever going to love a bad review or hate a good review. It's not going to get rid of it completely, but it certainly can help to see it in the context of the entire publishing process, rather than seeing it as a personal attack.
There are also platforms like, I know Kickstarter is the big one, but there are also GoFundMe and Indiegogo and things like that, where you can build an audience over time to try and get different projects off the ground by getting them pre-funded, where people will pay for copies of the books and things before the book is out, so that you can actually use that money for editing. And you can actually get in contact with those people in the same way that you can with what's the platform I'm thinking of, where people pay for you every month and then it supports you as a creator. You know the one. Patreon, yeah. So it can work a little bit like Patreon, where you have direct methods of communication with people who aren't necessarily your existing readers, but they're interested in the concept that you're building around a book. So I know of an author in the past who wanted to create a maths picture book for young children, and they were talking about the different different children who may be dyslexic or have other learning disabilities, and they could talk directly to the people who would be interested in that project, whereas they may not be able to find those people organically in their friendship circle, before they've got an audience. So you can actually put out bits of content and get feedback on it before you've even released the book through Kickstarter. And all the while you're doing that, you're building your audience and you're becoming funded.
Yeah,
so that can be very useful.
Kickstarter is particularly good of all the crowdfunding platforms for books. And Oriana there is really, really helpful and always happy to work with any authors who have ideas and to show them samples of ways in which people have used the platform before. So if that way of doing things appeals to you in any way, definitely have a chat with Kickstarter. And there are some other interesting platforms as well. There are more and more platforms, I think, coming up all the time. It's also possible to serialize and write your book in chunks before you put it out. And of course, Kindle Vela now allows that as well. So you can do it on the Amazon platform. So I think it will be fair to say that publishing is moving in this direction, and that those author publishers who don't move with that flow are likely to find themselves without sales. Because unless, of course, you organically and accidentally hit on an underserved, which does happen and can happen to you, but relying on that chance, relying on that luck is probably not a great business plan.
Yeah, I know there are already murmurs of traditional publishers working a bit in this way, but they're getting authors to do the lean publishing research and development before it actually comes to them publishing the book, so they can do all the marketing and if they've got the budget to go behind that, but they're actually getting the authors to do that. So there's Unbound is one of the fastest growing publishers, and they've got a traditional publishing model, but then they use a sort of lottery system or more of an X Factor style system where authors have to compete against each other, and then the most popular rises to the top and they get a publishing deal. And this is not completely dissimilar from the way Amazon publishing work, because obviously they already see the data behind the scenes on Amazon, and then they approach authors to give them Amazon publishing deals, and they know that they're already going to be successful because this author has already got a big audience. So it's all very, very data driven, and I think even quite slow moving traditional publishers are seeing that this is the way things are going, and they are using data analytics tools and the same market research tools to develop books before releasing them that indies are.
So a comment from Stuart: God, this all sounds so depressing. I just want to write. I've decided I don't care if I never sell a copy. I'd prefer that than funneling customers after A/B testing covers, etc. And Stuart, that's 100% valid response. And if you just want to write, absolutely, you wouldn't want to do this. This is not, we're not talking about this from a writing perspective for yourself. We're talking about this from a publishing perspective. So publishing means thinking about the reader. And if you want to publish to sell, then you have to think about these things. You may not decide to do the A/B testing, which I have to say brings me out in a rash as well. But we've given lots of different ideas. You don't have to do A/B testing, but the point is that you do have to shift the mindset that says, oh God, I just want to write, if you do want to sell. If you don't want to sell, fantastic. You don't, no worries, great. Away you go and write happily ever after. But this is a publishing perspective.
You could also sell without doing this. So there are some authors that write the book that they want to write and then they end up selling anyway. So this isn't the only way to sell. This is just a way to improve your chances.
Absolutely. And week after week after week, we have authors in ALLi saying, I'm not selling. And, this is a way that we're always looking at all the different ways in which that can be changed, and for those who are selling, in which they can sell more books. And I mean, I think that's the important thing to realize when you go from being a writer to being an author publisher, a self-publisher, an indie author, whatever word you want to put on it. But once you put that publishing bit in there, everything must change. Your mindset can't stay the same. It's not just, I'm going to write the book and put it out there and look who's going to take it and run with it. It might happen and you might win the lottery and, there might be a blue moon someday. But you improve your chances when you actually take some actions, and lean publishing is one way to approach that challenge. So any final words of wisdom, Dan?
Yeah, it would just be once you've lean published your book, there's always opportunities to lean market your book. And this is sort of the way that indies have been doing it already. So if you've had a little bit of a handle on marketing, you already sort of understand the lean publishing model. One thing I will say is a recent development is I know Amazon in the past has not liked people using affiliate links to get people to record clicks and things, because some authors, obviously they make a lot of money from affiliate income through Amazon affiliate links when they're promoting their book. People buy things like TVs and stuff, and they get a portion of all those sales. What it seems Amazon have coming down the pipeline, or it may have already started because I've seen things in the Amazon ads, is a concept called an attribution link, which you can use on any platform you want. And what it does is it doesn't give you the affiliate income, but it does allow you to track click-through rates and conversions of sales on the other end. So you get all of the data, you just don't get the affiliate link income, which means that you can be a lot more flexible and use these in things like email campaigns or Facebook messages that you can use, targeting readers. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to set up your own systems when it comes to the marketing as well as the publishing, because you can actually track different styles of marketing and see how they compare against each other just by using these sorts of links. And as the industry is developing and more software as a service companies are growing, we're getting more options, and there are lots of different places that you can use these sorts of links.
Great. Okay, so that is it on lean publishing. Do let us know if you have any further questions arising from what we've been talking about this evening. This episode will go out on our podcast on Friday next, selfpublishingadvice.org. You can find it there, and you can subscribe and get the show notes. We'll have some helpful links. And there are two resources we'd like to recommend. One is a blog, a good intensive blog called Lean Book Publishing, How to Drastically Increase Your Success Rates by Publishing Books the Lean Way, and that's by Sabrina Rickey. And there's also the sort of Bible for the lean publishers, which is Chris Fox's Right to Market. And we'll have the links to those and to other things that we've mentioned here in the show notes on Friday. And next month being the holiday season, we don't have a podcast. So we will be back. We'll be doing our highlights from the year next month. So we won't have a live event here on YouTube or Facebook Live. But we will see you again live here in January on the third Tuesday of the month. Until then, happy writing and happy publishing. Bye-bye.